Hi everyone, Kristina here. Welcome to day 10 of the holiday card series for 2018. I have to apologize today if my voice sounds a little funny. If it's any indication from what I've seen online on Instagram and Twitter and social media, I, like a lot of you, have a cold. Happens every winter and fall. So I'm suffering through a cold, but we'll get through it. Today's card features a really fun stamp set from Mama Elephant. I'm going to do a little colored pencil coloring on a dark surface, and I hope you guys enjoy. As mentioned, I'm going to be using a stamp set from Mama Elephant. This is the Holiday Biddies stamp set, and there's a lot of little images that you can use to create a pattern or have those be the focal points on your card. There's a lot you can do with this stamp set, including those little faces that are in the middle. I'm going to be using some steel gray cardstock from My Favorite Things, and I'm going to cut it down so that it's about 2 inches wide and 5.5 inches, 2 inches tall and 5.5 wide. I'm using some Misty Creative Corners to get that cardstock in the same position as I work with it today. I'm going to remove the corner just for a minute here while I assemble all of my stamps. And when I bring the door of the Misty over to pick up all of those stamps, it's going to pick up that cardstock. And I'm going to have to remove it and put it back in its place. And that's why I use the Creative Corners, so that I could stamp all of this at once. So if I was going to be making duplicates of this card, I definitely could do that. All the stamps are already in the Misty. I could just swap out new cardstock to stamp all of these different pieces. So while the Creative Corner is in the Misty tool, I just prepped it with an anti-static powder tool. This is a powder tool from EK Success, and I like to use that before I do heat embossing because it puts a layer of powder down on the cardstock and makes it so the embossing powder doesn't stick to areas where I don't want it. Using some Versamark ink for the stamping, and I'll just gently walk my fingers over each one of these images to make sure they all stamp perfectly in place. So after I remove the cardstock from my Misty tool, I'm going to be adding some embossing powder. I'm going to be using some white embossing powder today, and the specific powder I'm using is, Alabaster from Brutus Monroe. Once again, I apologize for my voice. It's been going in and out all day, so it's just one of those things. So sorry you guys have to put up with it, but hopefully it's not too bad. So I'm just sprinkling that embossing powder on and shaking off the excess. And after I have all of the images coated in embossing powder, I use my tweezers to hold the cardstock so that I could heat every single area and my fingertips wouldn't be burned. And I just heat set this until all of those lines were smooth and melted and the embossing powder was set. I did heat the back of the cardstock just to get rid of any warping. So I'm going to be using some Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils to do some coloring. And when I moved along with all this coloring, I started out with white, and then I just one by one added different colors. So I'm going to add some blues and greens and pinks and a little bit of yellow. I'm keeping a really simple color palette, and I'm not doing a whole lot of shading. I am going to do a little bit of shading on the tree and maybe in some of the white areas, but for the most part, this is going to be colored very, very simply. I'm going to turn on some music so you can enjoy the coloring. Once all of the coloring with colored pencils was complete, I brought in a fine-tipped Posca paint pen, and this is adding some white details onto different areas of this piece of cardstock. I decided that the sweater needed a little bit of a pattern. There are smaller stamps, like that snowflake stamp is at the very bottom. I could have stamped that snowflake in the center of that sweater, but I didn't think about it until after I had already colored everything in. So if you're going to be creating something with this stamp set, there are some smaller images that you can use to stamp on the sweater. I think that's what they're meant for. And then I added some polka dots on that present. And then this mug of hot cocoa was looking really, really bare. So I decided to write in a Noel across the mug. I think it looks really cute. In fact, I kind of want a mug like that now. I think that sounds great. I'm going to add some dots and maybe some little sparkle glistening areas, kind of filling out the areas between all of these images. It's going to help it look a little bit more finished, a little bit more intentional where all of these different images are placed. And I'm just using that same Posca paint pen for that. For the cardstock that's going to go behind this element here that I've colored, I'm going to be using an embossing folder, and I'm using some white cardstock. This is Nina Classic Crest Solo White cardstock. And I got a tip from my friend Sherry Carroll. She said, mist your cardstock just really lightly with a little bit of water before you put it through the embossing folder and the die cutting machine, because that will soften the fibers in the paper just enough that when it's put through this embossing folder, it won't crack the paper. And she's absolutely correct. I think I've seen a couple of you suggest this in the comments in the past as well, and it totally works. So you don't have to use a super thick cardstock for this. You can just mist it with water. I'm going to be using the Fa La La die cut or die from Mama Elephant, and I just used some red glitter paper for that. And then I'm going to use some foam tape and adhere my colored piece on top of this quilted textured background. Placing that on top. And then I'm going to start worrying about how this greeting is going to be adhered to my card. I decided to put a strip of vellum right behind it. And I'm just cutting it off to be the perfect size for that Fa La La die cut. And to get a nice ribbon end, I come in right in the center, and then I cut from the corner to the tip of that centered line that I already cut. And this gives me the perfect ribbon end to go behind my Fa La La die cut. I added, I added a small strip of that red glitter cardstock right at the bottom of that colored piece. I'll trim off the excess on each side. And then I'm going to assemble my greeting that's going to go on top. I'm using some Connect glue from Gina K Designs. This is a nice glue that has a really small tip on it, so it's easy to apply little dots of glue to different areas on this die cut. And I'll press that right over the top of the vellum, and then I'll press that down. Now, doing it this way, this gives me the opportunity for where to put adhesive on the back of the vellum. Now, if you've ever used vellum before, you know that any adhesive kind of shows through. So it's best to disguise any adhesive. And by doing it this way, I can put that adhesive behind the die cut, and then you won't be able to see any adhesive through the vellum. Pressing that down on top of my colored piece. And I'm glad I used vellum for this because some of that coloring still shows through. At this point, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for my card base, and I decided I would go ahead and make this card a 5x7 card. And because I was using some white cardstock that was cut to a regular card size, I had to trim the top and bottom a little bit so that I could have it be completely centered in on the front of a 5x7 card. So I created my 5x7 card base out of some soft navy cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. I just scored that at 5 so that I could fold it in half. I'm using my Teflon bone folder to get that fold really nice. Then I put some foam adhesive behind this area of the card that I've created. Lots of foam adhesive. I was not shy whatsoever. And then I press that down onto the front of the card. I think you could also do some an embossing folder on the front of the card. I think that texture on texture would look really cool too. So this is the card for today. I love the little sparkly die cuts and all of that coloring. Thanks for watching today's video. I really love the color palette that I ended up using with those colored pencils. I didn't go into it really thinking ahead, but I love the colors. They're fun and playful, especially for the holidays. On screen, I've got 2 more videos for you to check out. I'm sharing with you the day 10 video for the previous years of the holiday card series. So down below you've got 2017 and 2016. I've got all the other years of the holiday card series listed down below in the video description. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys very soon on Monday with day 11.